If you look on your table, you have these little stress things, just something to think about while we're talking about stress. Okay, so this is a bit of a snapshot. I apologize to the table over there who has seen some of these slides this past Saturday, but okay, Bill 132, if you're taking a snapshot on what's happening in Ontario right now in psychosocial, that's the main thing. It's an update of Bill 168. We still need a policy, but now sexual harassment is being highlighted. We not just need a policy, we also need a program to back it up. The problem with Bill 168 was once they had a policy, there wasn't much else you could force the workplace to do about it. And it has to be developed in consultation with the Health and Safety Committee. There's an obligation to conduct appropriate investigations, and I could tell you some stories about some terrible, inappropriate ones. Also, confidentiality and reporting, and also the Ministry of Labour can order an independent investigation. So these are the new things. Now, this is because harassment and sexual harassment can cause health effects. And this study on bullying showed that about 76% of those who were bullied actually suffered also from post-traumatic stress disorder. Now in Ontario, we just had this website on post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's for first responders and not really for the victims of workplace harassment. Although they can probably get some useful tools from there, that's not what the purpose was. But one thing I did like about the response website is this prevention triangle. And I think this has a lot of potential to be used for many other interventions in the workplace in health and safety. And remember, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, there are differing perspectives, and this came out in some of our discussions about this website. And one of the dominant ones is that we're approaching it from a psychological point of view, focusing on what's going on in people's heads. But if you take a psychosocial approach to it, you're also focusing what's going on in people's heads and how that interacts with other heads within an environment. And it's a more comprehensive, holistic approach to it. The standard also is affected by this perspective. When they devised the standard, they actually took out every mention of the word psychosocial and replaced it with psychological. And that has implications for the type of interventions you're considering. For instance, one of the major interventions as a result of the standard is to train people with mental health first aid. And personally, I've taken the course and I can attest to it. It's a great course. It really has big impact on people, especially when it comes to awareness. But think of it, if you're dealing with accidents, is the way to deal with accidents to train more first aiders? I know Val will say, yes, if you train more first aiders, it has an effect on safety, but is that really the type of prevention?
Not the only strategy.
So in prevention, you can break it down into different factors, and we seem to be really approaching the mental health piece in the workplace as an individual issue, trying to get resilient employees, teaching them how to deal with stress and getting them therapy. But some of the organizational ones, while I put mental health here instead of on the individual because I think it raises awareness and therefore it can be considered a secondary prevention level. But really what's needed is primary prevention at the organizational level. And the OSHCO's tool, I think in this discussion, it's kind of fell through the cracks. It's some great work that was done a few years ago on violence in the workplace and how to deal with it. Very practical assessment tools, a survey, a short one, action plans, and dealing with issues. And this all came from the Laurie DuPont incident. So it deals with the issue, what if the abuser and the victim work in the same workplace? So if you put this primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention in the context of what we usually think about at the work or along the path and at the source, it figures out this way. Now, as I said, a lot of the interventions are aimed at the individual, and the OSHCO ones are looking at how you can redesign the workplace. But what we really need to do is look at the source. Now, when we look at the source, we talked about hierarchy of controls today. The best way is elimination of the hazard. So we're looking for the cause of workplace violence and harassment. And there's some nice work done in Norway by Stahl Einarsson, and I just want to show some of his conclusions of what is causing. He was looking at bullying specifically, which is a type of harassment. Problems with the way work is designed. Some jobs just set other workers against each other. Incompetent management leadership, a socially exposed individual, negative climate, and culture that permits or even rewards bullying. So how do you measure those things? Well, thank you for asking. That's what we've been trying to do for the last 5-6 years with the mental injuries tools groups. And what we've come up with is we tried a number of different questionnaires, and the one we settled on was the Copenhagen Psychosocial Questionnaire, which we launched in 2012. Since then, we've evaluated about 100 workplaces, 8,500 surveys, and taken it to 8 union conferences for about 1,500. And one campaign alone had 50 workplaces in it. And we presented over 75 presentations, 76 now, and 12 peer-reviewed abstracts at various conferences. So we've been pretty busy. These are the things that the Copenhagen Psychosocial Questionnaire number 2, the second version, measures. And we also have it in app format, as we mentioned again, and again, thanks to the CCOHS for all their help on that one. But we've been using Danish comparison data, and that's caused some workplaces to complain, even though the Danes are the happiest people. So if you want to compare to anyone, they'd be the ones to compare to. So when we attended the COPSOC workshop in the international one in Paris last year, they were talking about updating this survey, and that each country needs to create some reference data by doing a cross-country survey. And since we were the only ones from Canada, we got selected. So we've been able to do a population survey. We collected, we polled over 4,000 Canadians using ECOS, their panel of theirs, and we looked at workplaces with more than 5 employees. It was made available in English and French. Originally we were just looking at Ontario, but later we expanded to all of Canada, and they provided weighting factors to adjust it to the census. And here are some of the results. This is for whether or not people have experienced undesired sexual attention, and broken down by the different economic sectors. And you can see that the retail trade and accommodation and food services are one of the biggest. Administrative support and waste management and remediation services. I don't know who dreamed up this one, but it's people like in call centers, security guards, and garbage men. Only if they're on contracts and not working for the municipality. Anyway, you can see, and if you compare those numbers, originally we were working with Danish population numbers. In the Danish population overall, it was 2.9%. So you can see that Canadian culture is a lot more, has a lot more sexual harassment than Danish culture. And then when we looked at violence, you get another picture here. Healthcare, education services are very high in wholesale trade. And again, when you compare that to Danish population, the only place that's less is professional, scientific, and hey, that's us. But when it comes to bullying, what popped out to like a sore thumb was mining, 46%. Here again, healthcare, accommodation and food services, public administration. I wouldn't have expected that, but maybe some of you in public administration will be able to attest to that. Again, this was more extreme than any of the other offensive behaviors when compared to the Danish population. Like, there's nothing even close. We're 3, 4, 5 times the level. And it says something to our culture. And speaking of culture, we asked people whether the culture of the organization tolerates behavior that harms mental health. And again, over a third of Canadians, cross-sectionally, have workplaces where they feel the culture tolerates offensive behaviors. So I think Bill 138 is very appropriate for what we need in this province, in this country. So some of the conclusions: the survey gives a unique cross-sectional picture of the state of psychosocial working conditions amongst Canadian workers that is currently not available from any other sources. So there's no databases like Ray was talking about that we can connect to. The data allows us to look at different economic sectors and target sector-specific problems. And offensive behaviors are particularly prevalent in Canadian workplaces when compared to the Danish. And sure, they're the happier people, but I think it's appropriate to make some of those comparisons. Further work, we're looking at doing separate French or English. There was quite a difference between the French and English in some of the factors, especially in the offensive behaviors and workload factors. And we're collaborating with the international group, and I think this will be released in 2018 along with, we're pooling all our data from the different nations. And we're working with the CCUHS also to update the app to the COPSUC 3 and hopefully create a French version, please. And stay tuned. In February 2017, as Val said, we expect to have a similar event such as this, focusing on psychosocial hazards and mental injuries. Thank you very much for hanging in there to the end.